Let's paint a portrait of Jin from BTS. I started this image like many others by sketching everything out and trying to get the placement and proportions right from the get-go. Did I get it right the first time round? No, not really. That said, I do feel like I wasn't that far off. This portrait was painted as part of a self-initiated series where I painted all the BTS members. The project was themed around their song Black Swan, and all the references came from the song's music video. My first attempt at adding the colours to this portrait is quite different to the first 3 process videos in this series. This is because I had a few previous iterations to those 3 images, which used a more pared down colour palette. So the takeaway from those early portraits is that I needed to add more colours in my colour palette to add enough contrast. Meaning that this was the first time I properly used this colour palette. The initial idea was to keep half the face warm toned and the other cool toned, though as I was painting I realised it wasn't quite working and I decided to add more of the skin tone into the cool tone side. It might seem a little bit odd, but at this stage I ended up repainting a lot of the darker areas of the image. This is because I realised that I used a different brush for these areas of Jin's portrait compared to what was used in the other images. This initial brush had a much softer texture and blended the strokes together, while the brush used for the other portraits have a more bristle-like texture that showed this in each stroke. So, in order to make sure that there was a consistency in brush strokes across the series, I had no other choice but to repaint some parts of this portrait. The initial version of this image has a style that resembles cel shading, a style you might be familiar with from comics or maybe mangas in particular. Though I suppose that in some way it might also be closer to the portraits I've created in the past using limited colour palettes. However, I painted those previous portraits using a different textured brush that more easily created colour variations, meaning that the shading wasn't as harsh. Obviously, I wasn't entirely certain where I was taking this style at the beginning, and I just kept working on it. I did end up creating smoother colour transitions, both due to being more mindful in how I used the main brush, but also due to the introduction of the halftone brush. While I created this series, I made sure to work on all the portraits at the same time, meaning I was able to take learnings from other portraits and apply them to this one as well. This also meant that I would often go back and revisit portraits I thought I had already finished. I did this to make sure that the series had a cohesive look. This way the colour usage and transitions were similar in each image. So while this portrait took me just over 5 hours to paint, the time was spread out over several days and sometimes with a week between sessions. If you have any questions regarding my process, please let me know in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. More process videos are up on my YouTube channel, and check out my social media accounts and my website for more of my work.